pleasure to be among so many friends this morning. Yes, we Conservatives are choosing a leader to beat Keir Starmer in 5 years' time. But we're also choosing a successor to a 200-year tradition of Conservative leadership and service. An heir to Disraeli, to Macmillan and to Thatcher. Tom Tugendhat is the best person, the only person who can continue that tradition into the future and lead our party going forward. Serve, lead, act. That is the slogan of this campaign. It is a strategy and a commitment. A strategy for the Conservative Party to return to government and a commitment of service and delivery for the country. As a soldier, Tom served our country at war. In politics, it's easy to tweet about patriotism and stand in front of flags. But when it mattered, when no one was watching, Tom put his life on the line for his country, for our country, day in, day out. And that's because when he speaks about loving his country, he means it, and he will act on it. I won my seat from the SNP in July. I know we cannot afford to take our country for granted, and we cannot afford to treat politics as a game. Tom never treats politics as a game, any more than he ever treated war as a game. Tom can unite our party, but more importantly, he can also unite our country. And then, in government, he can build a better future based on true Conservative principles. And so, it is an honour to introduce the next leader of our party and the next Prime Minister of our country, Tom Tugendhat.
Good morning. It's nice to see you too. Look, I'm here actually to apply for a job. But I've got to be honest with you, it's not the job I want. I don't want to be leader of the opposition. I want to be Prime Minister. Look, I don't want to oppose. I want to govern. But first we need to change. Because while people may sometimes vote for a party they don't always love, and sometimes they'll vote for a programme that they don't fully agree with, they will never vote for a party that they've stopped taking seriously. Now that's why I'm standing. I will make the Conservative Party a serious force again. I will make us respected for our experience and our realism, admired for our integrity, acknowledged for our achievements, and given credit for seeing the errors that we may make and correcting them. Now, by doing that, I believe that I will lead our party back to power. Now, my campaign will be sober. I'm just looking at a few. It will earn and deserve trust. And it'll be about governing. And I will work in opposition as you would expect a future Prime Minister to act. Because what I've learnt about leadership, about fighting for liberty and protecting our security, I didn't learn in Westminster, but in the army. And I won't be playing politics. I know that integrity matters. So I want to start with an apology. The Conservative Party owed you better. Politics is not a game. And we all know the cost when government isn't sober and serious. We saw it in the lives lost in Afghanistan, and then in that wasted chaos of that withdrawal. We saw it during COVID, not just in the lost years of education that cost so many, or the opportunities missed, nor even in the grief for lost loved ones, or those left to cope alone, but through the disrespect and the double standards. Now, like you, I witnessed the recent political trauma with a combination of depression and anger. I witnessed the failed coups and the successful ones. And I saw duty give way to ego. And that's why I'm standing before you today. Because this country can change. We must change. And Britain deserves better. And we need a different government. One that will serve our country with conviction and act for you. One that remembers the core duty of the state. And I believe that message is simple. My mission is the happiness and prosperity of the British people. Now let me say that again to be absolutely clear. My mission is the happiness and prosperity of the British people. Now it's easy to say, but it's tough to deliver. Because at its heart, it's about putting the government back at the service of the people. It's about investment and innovation, but it's also about freedom. Freedom to succeed, and yes, freedom to fail. It's about a commitment to grow our economy and to see our people prosper. And that's why this election, it's not just a coronation, it's not just a referendum on immigration or any other policy, it's not just a chance to refight old battles. That's all the politics of the past. What we are doing is we are choosing a new leader who sees clearly the challenges that we face. And we're giving them 4 years to do the hard work to prepare so that the next Conservative government will not waste one moment. We need to be ready from day one. Now, the last great economic transformation that our country saw was in the 1980s. Some of you will remember it well. It's time for a new Conservative revolution. Since those changes, Britain's creeping bureaucracy has returned, and it's stifling growth, and it's smothering opportunity. And we need to clear back those cobwebs so that once again our economy, and most importantly, of course, our people, can breathe free and make our country grow again. Now, we have some of the most creative and entrepreneurial people in the world, but without freedom, no one can prosper. Now, I'm standing because we need leadership, and we need to deliver that vision. And as leader, I will bring back the honest, the responsible state, one that serves you, one that leads the changes that we need, and that acts on its word. And that's what I'll deliver. Not just as leader of the Conservative Party, but as Prime Minister of this amazing United Kingdom. Now, I will set out the agenda for us to win back trust. And I'm optimistic for the future because I know that this country's history and culture have been built on the strongest possible foundations for success. And that's why I will lead in opposition as I will govern in office. I will listen to the serious ideas that come to us and support those who champion what is best for our country. I will win back younger voters, and I will deliver on these 4 objectives. First, I will rebuild the connections between and within England, Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland to see our shared economy grow. The government can't pull a lever, but it can release a brake. We can invest in infrastructure and recognise that what Ben Houchen has delivered in Teesside proves that Conservatives can deliver and can win across the United Kingdom. We know that the state has a role to create the environment for long-term investment, and that's what allows enterprise to take risks and to flourish. Because government doesn't create jobs. We all know that. But it can enable others to. And that's not just about planning. It's about everything, from lower energy costs and better transportation to infrastructure, education and transport. It's about recognising that talent is found across our country, but opportunity is not. This is about making sure that every part of our great United Kingdom has the respect and the commitment from our government to allow our people to succeed. It's about ensuring that this country has the right skills, the right grid connections and the right infrastructure. We are already a nation of entrepreneurs. We already have more startups each year than anywhere. And we also have more unicorns than my daughter has drawn on the walls of her bedroom. But our overregulation has made pensioners poorer by reducing savings returns, and it's drained the pools of capital we need to grow global leaders. Now, I'm going to draw lessons from Australia and Canada, where private savings and public investment, resilience and investment in infrastructure grow. And I will sunset the rules that are constraining smaller firms from innovating and competing. After all, we did not successfully roll back the frontiers of the state a generation ago, only to see them reimposed by stealth through regulation. We need to be bolder, much bolder, about setting the conditions for success and be even more determined to deliver the new Conservative revolution that we need. Now, that's the only way that we will grow the economy that we need to keep us protected at home. Because make no mistake, when we invest, we're investing in ourselves, but to keep us safe in a dangerous world. And that brings me to my second point. Let's be clear. The purpose of British foreign policy is to keep the British people safe and prosperous. That's it. It's not to play games. It's not to study the Afghan tribes, no matter how much some may find them. And it's not to virtue signal. We must be completely focused on putting our own people first. Now, of course, this doesn't mean Britain alone. We need partners and allies to keep us safe. From NATO, Lancaster House, the Five Eyes Alliance, to the CPTPP and AUKUS, our partnerships protect us. And they all matter. Alongside our allies in Europe, we're supporting Ukraine. But that should never come second to our own interests. Now, no one else would do differently. So let's focus on what we do with our own armed forces and intelligence services to go further in fighting that modern scourge, that modern version of the slave trade, human trafficking. We need to go further in making sure our defence is strong and our people are safe. Because our strength matters. And that's why investing in defence is not a choice like with other budget lines. It's not a decision we can make on our own. Our enemies and our allies set the conditions that we have to adapt to. They help determine what we must spend. Now, as we face a more dangerous world, let's be clear, we need to invest in our security. We cannot bet our future on the choices of others. And let's be honest, we can't depend on the kindness of strangers. And that's why Labour's plans are so wrong. They're planning to draw down our defences, to close off technology, and to reduce our protection. We need to make it absolutely clear that we will defend our national security and care about planning for 3% of our GDP to be spent on our national security. Now, many years ago, I heard the dangers that we're seeing change around the world. And I was right to warn that the golden era of China was over. I was right to warn that Moscow's gold was corrupt. And I'm sad to say that I was right to warn that the violence coming out of Tehran and threatening us all around the world is a danger to everyone in civilized world. This is no time for a fake heart or for an novice. We need to understand clearly that the threats we face, the threats that are out there, they are real. And for me, this is personal. Now, a century ago, my family's name was perhaps not common, but it was certainly spread across Europe. In that generation of totalitarian hatred, it disappeared from many countries where we had called home. We cannot appease tyrants, and that is a battle I have fought for years, and I have been sanctioned by Russia, Iran and China because of it. So I guess there's 3 leaders who won't be pleased to win. But the world is becoming more dangerous, and we do need to protect our interests. We need to reset Britain's foreign policy and rethink many of our assumptions to rebuild our resilience. And that starts at home. And it brings me on to my third point. Migration matters. Our security challenges are all connected. From energy and food to the environment and migration, we must realise that we are actually making choices as we balance outcomes. And we've got to be honest with the British people about the decisions we're taking and the choices we're making. High levels of low-skilled migrants are a choice. We allowed businesses to underinvest in skills and to make up for it by hiring from abroad. We allowed a culture to develop that saw people opt out of work. And we started to change that in recent months, but let's be honest. Over earlier years, we issued the visas needed to make sure our economy could have the illusion of growth while avoiding the necessary work of fixing these core problems. Now, our country was left dependent on immigration to maintain our active workforce. And after Brexit, instead of fixing the cause, we swapped young Europeans for older families from around the world. Again, maintaining the illusion of growth at the expense of real growth and real productivity gains here at home. Now that is the economy that we've run. That is the system that we have. And that's why migrant numbers are higher than ever before. And we've left ourselves with an invidious trade-off between immigration and the economic growth necessary to fund our public services. That's why there isn't a quick fix to this question, because we can only change the migration numbers and truly grow the economy that people feel, the money they earn, the cash in their pocket, if we're serious and honest about the choices we need to make. And it's just not true to say that one bill or one treaty could do that. We need to rethink our entire economy and invest, of course, in automation and training. But that alone isn't enough. We need to go much further. We need to make sure housing is affordable and transport connects people to jobs. And perhaps most of all, we need to change the culture amongst those who have been left idle and ignored, and amongst those who've been willing to leave them there. Now, I will be serious about leadership. I will connect policies and recognise complexity. But to drive change, we do need clear targets. Otherwise, there's always going to be another excuse. So under my leadership, the maximum level of non-British net migration will be capped at 100,000 people a year. That will allow businesses to start planning for a different kind of economy and make sure that everyone understands long in advance, too long in advance, that the public sector cannot depend on other people's children to step in for our own. Now, Now, we need to begin that change now. We need to make these 4 years of opposition count, because we need to stand up for the rights of our citizens, and we need to make sure we're standing up against those who try to harm us. And this comes to a different point on migration. We need to be clear that citizenship comes with duties and obligations. Canberra understands this. Australia recently expelled migrants who committed serious crimes, and those who were naturalised citizens were stripped of that citizenship. Last week, Germany, a country that obeys many of the same rules as us, deported 28 serious criminals back to Afghanistan. Now, where there are obstacles to us doing the same, we must remove them. The British people should never have their rights trumped by the rights of criminals who have come to do them harm. Now, that's why, as I've been arguing since I left the army in 2013, we need to opt out, to derogate, as the expression goes, from some aspects of the European Convention on Human Rights, and we need to reform others. And if we can't achieve what we need to in a reasonable time frame, we need to be prepared. I am prepared to leave. I am absolutely serious about my commitment to our security. I can't deliver on my mission to achieve the happiness and prosperity of the British people if we're not safe at home and secure in our own country. And that's also what brings me to my last point. We need to invest in and we need to reform our public services. Now, many of you will know that I care very deeply about our security and our defence, and I also care about migration and the growing economy. But as a father, my immediate priority is my children, their education and their future. Now, our kids are incredibly lucky to have the most amazing head teacher and a fantastic team of staff who teach them. And as an economy, that team has been freed to do what they think is best for their students, for my kids, and we trust them to deliver. They're the professionals. In our school. But now Labour are saying they're going to end that freedom. They're saying that instead of learning from the best, from the free schools, from the academies here in England, they're going to be using, extraordinarily, the failed model of Welsh education under a Labour government to make the changes. Now, that's disastrous. It's not just disastrous for our children, it's disastrous for our future. And by making envy the centre point of his education policy, Sir Keir Starmer is frankly promising that there is worse yet to come. Now, by taxing education, Starmer is using that to pay off the left. But he's paying it off at the cost of our kids who are just trying to do their best. And he's doing it because he's got absolutely no plan. He's got no plan for where he'll get the money from that it's going to cost to make this change. He's got no plan for where the kids are going to go when their parents can no longer afford the school. And he's got no plan to address what is clearly going to be the challenges that come out of what's one of the most vindictive policies that we've seen from a British government in generations. Now, we know what he's going to say. He's going to say he's taxing the rich. But he's not. He's attacking families. He's attacking that connection between all of us, that desire that every parent has to do their best for their children, to make sure they have a better start, a better future than they have themselves. And as Conservatives, we don't accept that. We are on the side of families. We're on the side of those who work hard and do the right thing by their community and by our country. And that's something that James, that Kemi, Mel, Priti, Rob and I all agree on. That's why I'm not fighting them. They're friends. They're good Conservatives. And they have my respect. I'm taking the fight to Keir Starmer. Now, all I've heard from Sir Keir recently is negativity, despair and fear, and frankly that's when he's talking about Angela Rayner. What I hear about the country is just him talking Britain down, because he has no idea how to build this great country up. And he's right when he says that there's a tough road ahead. That's because, despite his massive majority, he's got absolutely no idea what he's doing. He doesn't even know what his MPs are doing. And after dropping Corbyn and reinventing himself as the heir to Blair or to Brown or to, well, anyone, frankly, Keir Starmer is now only concerned with paying off the promises that he made to achieve power. Not to the country, no, to his party. He's bribed his union paymasters and made pensioners pay for it. And he's made strikes the bargaining tool of choice. You're going to have to be really rich before you can afford to vote Labour again. And it's no wonder he's preparing us for this bleak future, because he's already abandoned the country to the hard left. When he took down that portrait of Margaret Thatcher in Number 10, it wasn't just some sort of cheap political stunt that was beneath the dignity of Tony Blair and Gordon Brown. They didn't stoop to it. In fact, they invited Margaret Thatcher into Number 10. No, it was a rejection of the reforms that he's abandoned all of that. He doesn't believe in the future, and he's abandoning the growth that we all need. That's going to cost us all. And one more, with my friend George, who has worked incredibly hard and won a scholarship to dance at the Royal School of Ballet. But because they're not a rich family, and because they depend on a scholarship and on reduced fees, it's demanded sacrifices. Well, this grasping of Keir Starmer's political envy is going to make it unaffordable for them and no doubt for many other families. And while they are sacrificing all families they do, Keir is making it harder for them. Now that's what politics for. The ideology for people. In politics to support families and to serve our friends and our neighbours. I'm in politics because making our country safe and our people happy is the prime mission of any government. We need government to be there beside us. We need it to be there when we need it. But now we're starting to see our that's why So let me be clear. I will not accept despair. I will act to bring change, and as leader of the Conservative Party and Prime Minister, I will bring back a serious vision of a liberated economy and a connected Britain. I will draw lessons from Conservative leaders across the country and around the world, and I will deliver the Conservative revolution that we have for so long needed. Now, I will be serious, I will be honest and determined to make us stronger at home and abroad. And I will serve, I will lead, and I will act to make us better. I will work hard to regain your trust and to serve our great country, as I always have. And the best apology I can offer the past is the promise of better leadership and a better future. And that is what I will always do. My promise to you is clear. My mission is simple, and I will always act in the interests of my children and yours. Together, we can build a better Britain. Thank you. Thanks very much. Right, now we come to the good bit. Well, for some of you anyway. Who's going to start us off with the questions? Go on, Catherine.
Obviously a big reaction to the government's decision to have this partial ban on arms sales to Israel. Alicia Cairns, the Conservative, called for a full ban months ago. Do you think this is the right or wrong decision? And also, more broadly, you say we should be spending 3% on defence. What do you say to people who think that we can't afford that, given many people can't get an appointment to see their doctor?
So, first off, let's just be clear what Labour has done. On the day that the Israeli government discovered the bodies of more hostages, on the day that they had to share that news of grief and torment with families, on the very day that we saw the real price of Hamas and the evil extremist violence that they brought not just to Israel but also to the Palestinian people, on that day, the British government decided that it was the right day to stand against Israel's right to defend itself. I mean, that's a remarkable decision. And it will be a decision that has been heard not just in Washington and Tel Aviv, but around the world. Because if we're not willing to stand by our allies when they are literally discovering the bodies of their murdered citizens, what is the point of an alliance? And that's why we need to spend on defence. That's why we need to spend on defence. And let's be absolutely clear, there are going to be many decisions we're going to have to make over the next 4 years. And I'm not going to be writing a budget for 2029 today, and you wouldn't expect me to. And you're right, there are going to be trade-offs and decisions. But a week ago, I gave a speech on public services and the need to reform. And if we had been able to deliver the same reforms in education, in the NHS that we delivered in education, we would be even more efficient now. We would have the reforms now that allow us to make those changes. Now, that's what we need to be doing. We need to be looking for those reforms that allow us to spend not just more, but better, so that we actually get the GP appointments that we want in the place that we want at the time when we want. That's what I'm going to spend 4 years working on, so that on the first day of my administration of the next Conservative government in 2029, let me be clear, my leadership will be offering the immediate solutions to the problems that we've had through the laws and the actions that we will take. And the team that I will build to deliver it will be one made up of Conservatives who understand that the message is clear. This is about the prosperity and the happiness of the British people, and it is achieved by building on the energy and success of the British people. That's what I'm going to deliver. Beth. Hi, Beth.
Tom, you say you're a politician of integrity who doesn't want to play politics, and yet as a moderate Conservative, you are now saying, against all your past positions and principles, that you are prepared to leave the European Convention on Human Rights. Now, some might say that this is just an opportunistic attempt to win over right-leaning members in the party membership while betraying your one nation family. Are you really willing to do it? And if you are, what does it tell us about your integrity?
Beth, one of the things I've loved about this leadership contest is you find out who's been listening. The first thing I did, literally the first thing I did, before I was a candidate, before I'd asked to be on the candidates list, but literally just after I left the army. In fact, it was during my honeymoon, and my wife didn't thank me for it, but literally during that period, straight after I left the army in July, I wrote a paper for Policy Exchange, which, if you have trouble sleeping, Beth, I strongly recommend it. It's called Fog of Law, and it covers the legal intervention in the battlefield that the ECHR has changed. And it covers the fact that what we're seeing in battle, for commanders at every level, from Lance Corporal all the way through to General, is a legal structure that is not geared to war. It's geared to peace. And it's a legal structure that those who drafted the ECHR knew was not applicable to war. That's why they gave us the option to do something called derogating, to opt out of, say, certain clauses. Now, other countries have done it. France derogates in times of war, and has done for operations overseas in Afghanistan. We didn't. Now, my point is clear. My point is that we need to use the powers that are within the ECHR to derogate and to change the application of the law as it applies to us, so that we can achieve the aim of keeping the British people safe. Now, that has to be our priority. And so that's what I'm saying. But it's also true, I'm afraid, that in the last 30, 40 years, unsurprisingly, the treaty has evolved, and we now have an interpretive justice through the Strasbourg Court. Now that has changed the treaty, and that's why we need to see reform. Now, I'm not alone in saying this, by the way. You can speak to French lawyers, one I speak to quite often, has pointed out to me that this is a particular problem in many continental jurisdictions who don't have the same tradition of British law. So we need to see that reform. But I'm also clear that if we really cannot get the derogations to work and the reforms to function, then for me the priority is clear. I will always do what it takes to keep the British people safe. I promised 25 years ago to serve the Queen and to protect our country, and it is a promise that I have never given up and that I will never, ever resile from. I will always do what it takes, and if it turns out that the treaty cannot be reformed, and I cannot protect people from violent criminals, from murderers and rapists, without leaving the ECHR, then yes, we will leave the ECHR. Ben. Sorry.
Thank you. I think you're pitching yourself as something of a fresh start. But you backed Liz Truss in 2022. You served as a senior government until the end. The mistakes of the last few years were yours as well, wasn't it?
Of course.
What are the hard truths Tory party needs to hear about why it's such a the worst defeat in history? And are you the centrist candidate in this election?
I'm the Conservative candidate, Ben. Look, the things that we share as Conservatives is ambition. Ambition for our country, ambition for growth, ambition for our kids and for the future. And we share the knowledge that freedom is an essential underpinning to the ambition to grow, to change our country and to liberate our people. It's absolutely fundamental. And, you know, various people have expressed it in different ways, but not all of them have been able to deliver on their hopes. And I think we need to recognise that. We also need to recognise that, you know, you're right. I did serve in both the last cabinets. And I served, as you may remember, Ben, I served in silence because unlike when I was chair of the Foreign Affairs Committee and my job was to have a voice, my job was to keep the King's secrets and to keep the country safe. So you didn't hear me speaking out on issues that were not my responsibility, because I can tell you, those who were trying to kill us kept me busy enough already. So what I did was I focused on what my job was. I delivered on keeping Britain safe. I made sure we got the reforms in areas that I'm afraid I'm never going to talk about, and that we kept our people at the cutting edge of technology. That's what my job was. That's what I delivered. And that is what I will always do. I will always put the British people first. Go on, Camilla. Because you've got a foam finger, which I'm somewhat depressed at. I've got to be honest, whoever came up with the foam fingers is fired. Although my kids will just rehire them in a second, so... Yeah. Camilla, no. Absolutely not. You should always be proud of Britain. Look, I'm not going to tell you for a second that we're perfect. We're not perfect. No country is perfect. But look at our history. Look at the first country to end slavery. Slavery carried on, by the way, in countries like Mauritania right up until the late 70s, the early 80s. Slavery continues, sadly, across the world in different ways. We fought slavery at a time when nobody else was willing to do so. We liberated people, we gave votes to people, and we created a parliamentary democracy in this country at a time when dictators, monarchs, were ruling absolutely. And we changed the opportunity for millions and millions of people, not just in this country, but around the world. Look at the reforms that we achieved through insurance and law. Look at the ability we gave to people to share risk and to prosper. Look at the changes that we built into a world that made us more connected, more prosperous, more free than we have ever been. The last 80 or so years have really been the British century. I know the Americans will claim it, but they're wrong. And they've been the British century because they are built, those last 80 years are built on principles that were invented in coffee houses that the Spectator was created to write about. And they were created in the principles of a sharing, open and cooperative economy, building effectively trust between people by creating the algorithm of predictability that we call the law. It is a remarkable achievement, and we have a huge amount to be proud of. And all I can say to those who question that is you haven't seen the other guy. Aggie, are you there? There you are. I thought I saw you. So look, I think Kemi is one of the best communicators in our party, and I love hearing her speak. I think she's great, and she's a really, really good friend, so you're never going to hear me being critical of her. I think she's a fantastic asset to the Conservative Party, and I'm proud that she's sitting on the green benches alongside us. You know, we all use our own expressions. We all have our own phrases, and the real challenge is not from each other. It's from Starmer and what he's trying to do to this economy. He's trying to destroy us. He's trying to drag us back to the 1970s. And what he's really trying to do is he's trying to take away the powers that we have all had as citizens, those elements of our lives that we can control, whether it's in education or whether it's in housing, whether it's in the ability to get to work or to get around. And he's trying to take it all away. That's the real challenge, and that's what we've got to focus on. Because the truth is, you know, we can focus on the past if you like, Aggie, but, you know, I'll leave that to Anthony Seldon. He writes much better books than I ever will. What we need to do is to recognise the errors, recognise the mistakes, own them and be honest about them, but offer the best apology that we can. And the best apology that I can offer the British people is to lead this country differently, to put the government at the service of the people, and to make sure that this country, this great country, despite what some people who Camilla is quoting may think, this country is genuinely the best country in the world. It offers the most amazing salvation, not just to ideas, not just to people, but to an entire way of life. Ryan, where are you? There you are. Thanks, mate.
Part of the battle for the next Tory leader is to win over younger voters to the under-40s. Why are you the right person to do that, to raise their list standards, to get them on the housing level? How can you offer that focus on them?
Well, Ryan, one of the things that we've seen recently is quite a lot of gimmicks in politics, and we've seen it over many years. And the truth is, this is an incredibly complex world, and decisions are interconnected. And we know that I can promise, if you like, the houses that Angela is going to bulldoze people's objections to build. But the truth is they won't be built in the right place because she hasn't got the courage to take on the Labour mayors who've failed. So instead, she's taking on the green belt and trying to build in the areas that we should conserve. What I'm offering is the honesty that we need. This is recognition that actually we need to connect generations and that we've done that as well as we could in our economy. Now, I've just touched on the fact that we're seeing so much of our pension savings delivering lower than needed returns, and that's costing old people. It is costing old people. But do you know who it's also costing? It's costing young people. Because that capital, that money, instead of being the lifeblood of a growing economy, has been frozen. It's dead. It's sitting in government debt. We need to take that money out of government debt. We need to take it out of all of that frozen assets, and we need to turn it back into the lifeblood that sees people innovating, hiring, changing their communities, giving employment, and making this country grow. Effectively, we need to turn dead money back into live money. And in this country, when we talk about housing, it's true, of course we need to talk about young people. Of course we need to talk about opportunity. We also need to talk about the fact that this country has worshipped bricks for far too long. We've created an idol out of the housing industry, when what we actually need to do is make sure that people with brains have the opportunity to succeed. And that's a rebalancing that we need to see in this economy. That's why I'm talking about a conservative revolution. This isn't a single policy. It's not a quick fix. I'm going to need 4 years. Sadly, it is going to be 4 years. But I'm going to need all 4 years of opposition to make sure that our policies are ready. Because I tell you what, on day one, I'm going to need to start. Because the leadership we offer will need to begin right at the beginning. It's going to take us an entire term of government, and maybe two, to bring about the conservative revolution that this country truly needs. Sam, go for it.
One of your rivals saying it would take decades to renegotiate because the number of talks are too involved in complexity. So your policy is if you can't secure reform, you don't really meaningful to set a timetable. So how long would you give it? A year?
Look, Sam, I'm not going to give you a date, but I am going to tell you it's a reasonable time period. And frankly, I mean, I've heard this from others, and, you know, I respect their position, but one of the great privileges I had over the last 7 years, I spent 5 of them as chair of the Foreign Affairs Committee. And that means I've got quite a few friends in foreign capitals. And I've been speaking to them over recent years, and some of them are now in government, and some of them are now in opposition, some of them are chairing committees, some of them are doing other things. But what is clear is what I am talking about, the kind of reforms that I'm sharing, are the kind of reforms we all need to see. Just look at Germany. Look at Germany. There is a country that has, for very obvious historic reasons, a very developed sense of human rights. And yet they recognise that the human rights of a criminal can never trump the human rights of a citizen. It simply isn't right. And if you think it is, all you're doing is you're undermining people's trust in a government, and they will turn to parties who you may not like. Because the fundamental duty of any government is to do that. Frankly, you need to. And that's why, you know, this is an argument I've been making. I've been making it for 11 years, and I'm delighted it's finally being heard. But I've been making it for 11 years. But actually, it's not even my argument. It's an argument that we've heard for 2,000 years. It's a very simple argument. It's that the Sabbath is made for man, not man for the Sabbath. And the entire purpose of international treaties is to keep British people safe, not for us to worship international treaties. And if those treaties are not delivering that security, then we should do 3 things. The first is we should get out of the clauses that don't help. The second is we should reform the bits that we need to. And the third is if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. And we need to face the fact that people of integrity, of dignity, people who we should deeply respect, people like Douglas Maxwell Fyfe, the later Conservative Attorney General, who was instrumental to bringing justice to the Nuremberg war trials and who then was key to drafting the European Convention. They wrote this treaty in 1945. Well, in fact, we signed it in 51 and others ratified it in 53. And they wrote it for a different world. They wrote it for a world before jet engines. They wrote it for a world before migration numbers were in the millions, not in the thousands. And they wrote it for a world in which terrorism, the kind of terrorism that we see, that I've been fighting for the last 2 years as Security Minister, was simply nothing even close. So we need to be absolutely honest with the British people. And that's what I'm saying. I'm not saying that we should tear up the past, that we should ignore our traditions, or we should smirch those great leaders who wrote such wonderful documents. What I'm saying is that when they don't work, we need to look hard at what we need to change. And if necessary, we need to leave.